Here I book here how to stop and how to avoid anxiety. Here I read this book with fun and make my English much better. Here I read this book. Here I read this book to make my English better and make my English better. Make my English better. There is no other purpose of anything else. Uh, Book's name is How to Avoid Anxiety and How to You Win Over the Anxiety. The next is first is you the how I conquer. First is an 16 ways and the 16 ways in which this book will help you. 16 ways in which this book will help you. 16 ways in which this book will help you. 16 ways 16 ways in which this book will help you. 16 ways in which this book will help you. देखिए यहाँ पर 16 तरीके हैं. देखिए 16 तरीके हैं जिनसे ये बुक एक किताब आपकी मदद करेंगे. देखिए गिव्स यू ए नंबर ऑफ प्रैक्टिकल टेस्टेड फॉर्मूलाज फॉर सॉल्विंग वरी सिचुएशन. यहाँ पर एक खास देखिए एक खास बातें कहा गया है. देखिए gives you a number of practical tested formulas for solving worry situation. Gives you a number of practical tested formulas for solving worry situation. Gives you a number of practical tested formulas for solving worry situation. So देखिए shows you how to eliminate 50% of your business worries immediately. Shows you how to eliminate 50% of your business worries immediately. Brings you 7 ways to cultivate a mental attitude that will bring you peace and happiness. Shows you how to listen. Shows you how to lessen financial worries. देखिए यहाँ पर इसमें जो आपको कहा उसको था. देखिए कि सोज इसमें क्या कि सोज यू एक मिनट यहाँ चौथा नंबर आपके यहाँ बता दें कि सोज यू हाउ टू लेसन LESS ये मतलब कम करना. सोज यू हाउ टू लेसन फाइनेंशियल वरीज. एक्सप्लेन ए लॉ दैट विल outlaw many of your worries. Tells you how to turn criticism to your advantage. Tells you this line is very important to me. It tells you how to turn criticism to your advantage. Tells you how to turn criticism. Tells you how to turn criticism to your advantage. Shows how the housewife can avoid fatigue. Shows how the housewife can avoid fatigue and keep looking young. Keep looking young. Shows how the housewife can avoid fatigue and keep looking young. Gives 4 working habits. Gives 4 working habits that will help prevent fatigue and worry. तो हम देखिए गिव्स फॉर वर्किंग क्या कि गिव्स फॉर वर्किंग हैबिट्स. गिव्स फॉर वर्किंग हैबिट दैट विल हेल्प प्रिवेंट फैटिग एंड वरी. टेल्स यू हाउ टू एड 1 hour a day to your working life. Tells you how to add 1 hour a day to your working life. Shows you how to avoid emotional upset. Shows you how to avoid emotional upsets. Gives you the stories of escorts of everyday man and woman. Gives you the stories of escorts of everyday man and woman who tell you in their own words how they stopped worrying and started living. देखिए gives you Alfred Adler's prescription for curing melancholia in 14 days. Gives you Alfred Adler's prescription for curing melancholia in 14 days. Gives you the 21 words that enable the world famous physician to banish worry. Explain the 3 magic steps that explain the 3 magic steps that that he uses to conquer anxiety shows you how to use shows you how to use that what William James called the sovereign cure for worry, and gives you detail of how many famous men conquer worry men like अब देखिए हाँ इन हाँ देखिए हाउ दिस बुक देखिए यहाँ पर क्या कि हाउ दिस बुक वाज रिटन एंड व्हाई हाउ दिस बुक रिटन एंड व्हाई सी देखिए हाउ दिस बुक वाज रिटन एंड व्हाई हाउ दिस बुक वाज रिटन एंड व्हाई हाउ दिस बुक वाज रिटन एंड व्हाई देखिए क्या हाउ दिस बुक वाज रिटन एंड वाई की बात करते हैं देखिए 35 years एगो आई वॉज वन ऑफ द अनहैप्पीएस्ट लेट्स LADS लेट्स ठीक है 35 years एगो आई वॉज वन ऑफ द अनहैप्पीएस्ट लेट इन न्यूयॉर्क आई वॉज सेलिंग मोटर ट्रक्स फॉर ए लिविंग I didn't know what made a motor truck run. That wasn't all. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to know. I despised my job. I despised my job. I despised my job. DESPIEDES PISED. I despised my job. I despised living in a cheap furnished room. I despised living in a cheap furnished room on West 56th Street, a room infested with cockroach. I still remember that. I had a bunch of I still remember that I had a bunch of neckties hanging on the walls, and when I reached out of a morning to get a fresh necktie, the cockroaches scattered in all directions. The cockroach scatters in all directions. I despise having to eat in cheap. I despise having to eat in cheap, dirty restaurants that were also probably infested with cockroaches. आई कैम टू बाई देखिए यहाँ पर क्या है कि आई कैम होम देखिए आई कैम होम टू माई लॉन्ड्री रूम ईच नाइट विथ ए सिक हेड एक देखिए यहाँ पर आई कैम होम देखिए आई कैम होम टू माई लॉन्ड्री रूम आई कैम होम देखिए आई कैम होम टू माई लॉन्ली रूम ईच नाइट विथ ए सिक हेडेक SIC headache bread and fed my disappointment the headache bread and fed by disappointment worry bitterness and rebellion. I was rebelling because the dreams I had nourished back in my college days had turned into nightmares. Was this life was this the white adventure? Was this life was this the white adventure? Was this the white adventure? Was this the white adventure? Was this the white adventure which I had looked forward so eagerly, so eagerly देखिए eagerly was this all life was this all life would ever mean to me देखिए was this all life would ever mean to me working at a job I despised living with cockroaches eating wild food and with no hope for the future I longed for leisure to lead I longed for leisure to read and to write the books I had dreamed of writing back in my college days. हाँ, कॉलेज डेज की बात देखिए, आई न्यू देखिए, आई हैड एवरीथिंग, आई हैड एवरीथिंग देखिए, आई हैड एवरीथिंग टू गेन द नथिंग टू लूज बाय गिविंग अप द जॉब आई डिस्पाइज, आई वाजंट इंटरेस्टेड इन मेकिंग ए लॉट ऑफ मनी। देखिए, आई न्यू आई हैड समथिंग, आई न्यू आई हैड everything. I knew I had everything to gain and nothing to lose by giving up the job I despised. I wasn't interested in making a lot of money. I wasn't interested in making a lot of money, but I was interested in making a lot of living. बहुत अच्छी बात यहाँ पर कहा गया है। देखिए, I knew I had everything. I knew I had everything to gain. I knew I had everything. I knew I had everything. I knew I had everything. I knew I had everything to gain and nothing to lose by giving up the job I despise. I wasn't interested in making a lot of money, but I was interested in making a lot of living. In short, I had come to the Rubicon, to that moment of decision which faces most young people when they start out in life. So I made my decision, and that decision completely altered my future. It has made the last 35 years happy and rewarding beyond my most utopian aspiration. देखिए, my decision was this: I would give up the work I loathed, LOATHED, loathed. And देखिए, my decision was this: I would give up the work I loathed, and since I had spent 4 years studying in the state teacher preparing to teach, I would make my living teaching adults classes in night schools. Then I would have my days free. Then I would have my days free to read books, prepare lectures, write novels, and short stories. I wanted to live to write, and write to live. I wanted to live to write. I wanted to live to all of you, and I wanted to live to all of you, and write to live and work for all of you. देखिए, what subject should I teach to adults at night? What subject should I teach to adults at night? As I look back, देखिए यहाँ पर क्या, हैज़ आई लुक बैक, यहाँ देखिए, माई डिसीजन वाज दिस आई वुड गिव अप। देखिए यहाँ पर क्या, आई माई डिसीजन वाज दिस आई वुड गिव अप द वर्क आई loathed, and since I had spent 4 years studying in ahead। देखिए, what subject should I teach to adults? What subject should I teach to adults at night? Has I looked back and evaluated my own college training, I saw that the training and experience I had had in public speaking had been of more practical value to me in business and in my life than anything else I had studied in college all put together. Why? Because it had wiped out my timidity and lack of confidence, and given me the courage and assurance to deal with people. It had also made clear that leadership usually gravitates to the man who can get up and say what he thinks. It had also made clear that It had also made clear that leadership usually gravitates leadership use and the leadership usually gravitates to the man who can get up and say what he thinks. I applied for a position teaching public speaking at the night extension courses both at Madhepura and the Madhepura college. But these universities decided they could struggle along somehow without my help. But these universities decided they could struggle along but these universities decided but these universities decided they could struggle along somehow without my help. I was disappointed. I was disappointed. I was disappointed. I was disappointed. Then I was disappointed. Then देखिए आई वॉज डिसअपॉइंटेड देन बट आई नो थैंक गॉड देखिए यहाँ पर क्या आई वॉज डिसअपॉइंटेड देन बट आई नो थैंक गॉड दैट दे हैड दैट आई वॉज डिसअपॉइंटेड देन बट आई नो थैंक गॉड दैट दे हैड टर्न आई वॉज डिसअपॉइंटेड देन बट आई नो थैंक गॉड दैट दे डिड turn me down. I was disappointed then, but I know thank God that they did turn me down because I started teaching in YMCA night schools where I had to show concrete results and show them quickly. What a challenge that was. These others didn't come to my classes because they wanted college credits or social prestige. They came for one reason only. They wanted to solve their problems. They wanted to be able to stand up on their own feet and say a few words at a business meeting without fainting from fight. Salesmen wanted to be able to call on a tough customer without having to walk around the block 3 times to get up courage. They wanted to develop poise and self confidence. They wanted to get ahead in business. They wanted to have more money for their families. For their families, and since they were and since they were paying their tuition on installment basis, and they stopped paying if they didn't get result. And since I was being paid not a salary but a percentage of the profit, I had to be practical if I wanted to eat. I felt at the time I was teaching under a handicap, but I realized now that I was getting priceless. I was getting priceless training. I had to motivate my students. I had to help them solve their problems. देखिए यहाँ पर क्या I had to motivate my student. I had to help them solve their problems. I had to make each session so inspiring that they wanted to continue coming. I had to make each session. So inspiring that they wanted to continue coming. I had to make each session. So inspiring that they wanted to continue coming होता है. I had to come each session. So inspiring that they wanted to continue coming. I had to make each session so inspiring that they wanted to continue coming. It was exciting. It was exciting work. I loved it. I I astounded. I astounded at how quickly these business men developed self confidence, and how quickly many of them secure promotion and increased pay. The classes were succeeding far beyond my most optimistic hopes. The classes were succeeding far beyond my most optimistic hopes. Within the seasons, which had refused to pay me $5 a night in salary, were paying me $30 a night on a percentage basis. At first, I taught only public speaking, but had the early went by, I saw that these adults also needed the ability to win friends and influence, um, mm, win peoples and win peoples and affect peoples, win friends and influence people. Since I couldn't find an adequate फिर हम देखिए क्या कि सिंस इसमें आपको क्या कि सिंस देखिए I saw देखिए $5 were paying me $30 a night on a percentage basis. At first, I taught only public speaking, but had earlier went by, but had the earlier went by. But has the earlier went by, 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 but has the earlier went by. देखिए यहाँ पर क्या है went by. देखिए I saw that these adults also needed the ability to win friends and influence people. Since I couldn't find an adequate textbook on human relation, I wrote one myself. It was written, देखिए आप it was written, no, it wasn't, देखिए it wasn't written, देखिए it wasn't written in the usual way. It grew, देखिए it grew and evolved, देखिए it grew and evolved out of the experiences of the adults in these classes. I called it how to win and influence people in देखिए since it was written solely had a textbook for my own adult classes, and since I had written 4 other books that no one had ever heard of, I never dreamed that it would have a large scale. I am probably one of the most astonished authors now living. Had the years went by, I realized that another one of the biggest problems of these adults was worry. I realized that had the years went by, I realized that another one of the biggest problems of these adults was worry. A large majority of students were businessmen, executive salesmen, engineers, accountants, a cross section of all the trades and profession, and most of them had problems. There were women in classes, business women and housewives. They too had problems. They too had problems. Clearly, what I needed was clearly what I needed. Clearly, what I needed was clearly what I needed was a textbook on how to conquer worry. So again, I tried to find one. I went to Madhya Pradesh, Madhya Great Public Library at 15th Avenue and 42nd Street, and this line is not important. To my astonishment said that this library had only 22 books listed under the worry. I also noticed to my amusement that had 189 books listed under worms, almost 9 times as many books about worms it has about worry. Astonishing isn't, since worry is one of the biggest problems facing mankind. and you would think that you would think wouldn't you that you would think wouldn't you that that high school and college in the land would give a course on how to stop anxiety, how to avoid anxiety. Yet if there is yet if there is even one course of on subject in any college the land, I never heard of it. No wonder David and he said in this book how to worry successful. We came to maturity, with has we came to देखिए यहाँ पर क्या we come to यहाँ पर we come to maturity with has little preparation for the pressure of experience has a bookworm asked to do a ballet. देखिए यहाँ देखिए we come to maturity with has little preparation for the pressure of experience has a bookworm asked to a ballet. The result, more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles. यहाँ देखिए यहाँ आपको कहा गया, देखिए बहुत अच्छी बात है आपको यहाँ पर कहा गया द रिजल्ट, देखिए द रिजल्ट मोर देन हाफ ऑफ आवर द रिजल्ट मोर देन देखिए द रिजल्ट मोर देन half of our hospital beds more than half of our the result more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles की बात करते हैं. The results, more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles. I looked over those 22 books on worry, reposing on the shelves of the public. देखिए the result, देखिए more than half of our hospital beds, more than half of our hospital beds, देखिए more than क्या more than half, देखिए more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles. बहुत अच्छी लाइन यहाँ पर लिखा गया कि more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles. More than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles. आपको होता है more than half of our, देखिए more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles होता है. More than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people. More than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles. यानी कि more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional देखिए more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles. More than half of our hospital beds are more than half of our hospital beds are occupied by people with nervous and emotional troubles. देखिए हाँ in addition I purchased all the books on worry I could find, yet I couldn't discover even one that I could use. It has a text in my course for adults, so I resolved to write one myself. देखिए I began preparing myself to write this book 7 years ago. देखिए by reading what the philosopher of all ages have said about worry, देखिए by reading what the philosopher of all ages have said about worry, I also read hundreds of biographies, also the way from Confucius to Churchill. I also interviewed scores of prominent people in many walks of life, such as I also did something else. I also did देखिए यहाँ पर क्या I also did something else that was far more important than the interviews and the reading. I worked for 5 years in a laboratory for conquering worry, a laboratory conducted in our own adult classes. As far as I know, it is the first and only laboratory of its kind in the world. This is what we did. We gave students a set of rules on how to stop worrying and asked them to apply these rules in their own lives, and then talk to the class on the results they had obtained. Others reported on techniques they had used in the past. They has a result of this experiences, has a result of this experiences, has a result of this experience. I promise I have listened to more talks on how I conquer worry than has any other individual whom ever walked this earth. In addition, I read hundreds of other talks on how I conquer worry, talks that were sent to me by mail talks that had on prize in our classes that are held in more than 170 cities throughout the Madhya Pradesh. So this book didn't come out of an ivory tower. Neither is it an academic preachment on how worry might be conquered. Instead, I have tried to write a fast-moving, concise document report on how worry has been conquered by thousands of others. One thing is certain: this book is practical. You can set your teeth in it. You can set your teeth in it. I am happy to say that you won't find in this book stories about an imaginary. I am happy to say that you won't find in this book a story about an imaginary देखिए यहाँ पर और a wake देखिए whom no one can identify except a few rare cases. This book names and give street addresses. It is authentic. It is authentic. It is documented. It is vouched. It is vouched for vouched vouched for and certified. Science said the French. It is a collection of successful recipes. That is what successful recipes. That is what this book is, a collection of a successful and time. It took a collection of successful time tested recipes to read our lives of worry. However, let me however let me warn you how let you you won't find anything new in it, but you will find much that is not generally applied. And when it comes to that, you and I don't need to be told anything new. We already know enough to lead. We already know enough to lead perfect lives. We have all read the Golden Rule and the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on Mount. Our trouble is not ignorance, but inaction. Our trouble is not ignorance. Our trouble is not ignorance, but inaction. The purpose of this book is to restate, illustrate, streamline, air condition, and glorify lot of ancient and basic truth, and kick you in the science and make you do something about applying them. You don't pick up this book to read about how it was written. You are looking for action. All right, let's go. Please read the first 40 pages of this book, and if by that time you don't feel that you have acquired a new power and a new inspiration to stop worry and enjoy life, then toss this book into the dustbin. It is no good for you. uh, and here I will finish, and one fundamental fact you should know about worry I will discuss after this video again in other video. And now come on the this thing.